If you're married or with a lifetime partner, should you retire at the same time? Well, that's among the 10 most common retirement questions that financial planners receive. And here to talk with me about this is Dana Anspach from Sensible Money. Dana, welcome.
Thanks, Bob.
So, in your practice, one of the more common questions you get is, should we retire at the same time?
Yeah, and I wouldn't always say it's phrased as should we, but can we? Is it a good idea? And there can be financial constraints that come into that. And there can be, oh my gosh, what are we going to do if we're in the same space together every day? So there's two elements to that. I would say there's are there financial reasons that we should or should not? And then what is our life going to look like now? It's going to be different. We're going to be in the same space. And how do you work through that set of issues that can come up?
Right. And I suspect that conversation about should we retire at the same time or can we needs to take place long before you think about actually retiring, right? Because you want to get on the same page and not realize, as sometimes people do, I didn't say I want to buy an RV when you retired, right?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes as people start to talk about their vision for retirement, it's very different. My own parents have experienced that. So my dad prefers to stay at home and not travel a whole lot and maybe take one big trip a year. And my stepmom always had this vision of them in a camper, an RV, going around and visiting all the national parks. And so they've had to work through that. And she's had to take some trips on her own. And then as a family, we participate in the big trips. But certainly it's understanding, do we have the same vision around retirement? What areas do we align in that we'll do together? And what are some of the things that might be okay if you go and do separately and develop friendships or relationships, outside of that family unit that are going to fulfill that need?
Yeah. Do you find that there's a big difference when you think about folks who maybe are close in age versus spouses who may be far apart or partners who may be far apart in age? The husband is 65 or 67 and the wife or spouse or partner might be 60 or 62 or even younger.
Yeah, I think the age difference you described might not be as big of a consideration, but of course, we've had couples that have 8, 10, even 20 years age difference. And there are what I most often see is that they are striving for a period of time where they can go and travel and do things together while acknowledging that later in retirement, it may not look like that. There may be the older spouse that needs care or needs to stay home, and the freedom for the younger spouse to be out and about and still do things. But most of the time, if there's a really big age gap, they seem to know that that's the reality as they're entering into retirement. Having open discussions about it, bringing it into the light and saying, what do we each picture that this will look like? What are our concerns? I think that adds a tremendous amount of value to the process.
Right. And I think if you're a client and you're talking to a planner, it almost seems like the planner not only has to be a money expert, but perhaps a psychologist at the same time, because these are some non-financial issues that they're talking about as well as financial.
They are non-financial issues. We have had them come up in meetings, and sometimes I've had people start arguments in meetings, and you just sit back and let them have that conversation. And I see our role as asking questions, not really supplying the answers when it comes to those values questions. I can say overall, I've seen really good things come out of those conversations. And as a planner, can it be a little awkward sometimes? Of course. Of course it can. But people are discussing very private business and sometimes back and forth. Well, I thought this. Well, I thought that. But if you just sit back and let those conversations happen, it can be really good.
Right. And I would imagine too that this is an iterative process, right? Maybe no one comes in knowing exactly what their vision is, but you have to sort of tease out the vision over maybe a period of several meetings or not.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, sometimes there's financial reasons. So I've had couples where one was the primary breadwinner for a long time, and now it often is the younger spouse has the opportunity to be the primary breadwinner while the older spouse retires. And I have seen situations where that feels really good to that younger spouse, where they feel like it's their opportunity to give back and contribute to the family. Where I've seen that come into play most often is with healthcare. So, the younger spouse, or just one spouse, whichever one wasn't going to retire yet, had health care. And if they could continue working to 65 and keep that employer sponsored health care, that was going to add a lot to the bottom line financially to the household. And so spouses would discuss that and say, okay, we agree, I'm going to stay home now, and you're going to continue to work, and for sometimes 2, 3, 4 more years. What I've seen happen is a renegotiation of the household duties. And that's kind of fun. I had one where, now the husband began doing all the laundry and doing all the cooking and doing the grocery shopping, and the other spouse had never experienced that before, and they would laugh and joke about it, and they were just having fun with it, truthfully, having fun with their new roles and knowing it was a transition phase.
What a treat to be able to sort of give the laundry duties away or the grocery shopping duties away. I know my wife would love that.
Yeah, it was pretty fun, and I think it's just a matter of negotiation. I'm understand. I mean, maybe we call it discussion versus negotiation, but sometimes it is a negotiation. Hey, I'm going to work longer now to provide our health care. What are you going to do while you're sitting here retired?
So when I think about this question about can we or should we retire at the same time, I also think about what we're retiring to. You mentioned sort of, maybe one person wants to travel a lot or not at all. But I also have seen research that suggests that there's some sort of common things that people do once they do retire: gardening, grandchildren, volunteer work. Do you see that happening too when folks are retiring at or about the same time, where they may have this common interest around things like gardening, grandkids, and volunteer work?
I've certainly seen grandkids and family play a big role where both halves want to go visit family or want to reconnect with people from, perhaps their school age years that they've stayed in touch with, sometimes distant family that they haven't seen in many years. So I've seen that. I've also seen people connect around hobbies. So it might be a motorcycle riding group. I had a client in a Corvette driving group. They would meet up with other Corvette drivers and take long distance trips around the country. Sometimes it's a hobby around golf, or I've seen people sailing where they'd always wanted to sail together. So they go out and learn how to do that. So a connection around hobby. And I've also seen people who may connect on one element, let's say family, but they each have very strong hobbies. One couple that comes to mind, he loved translating. So he would translate engineering text from German to English, and that was somewhat of his retirement hobby. And she loved volunteering. And so while they connected around family, they also had these outside passions that they each enjoyed. And so it gave them their separate identities as well as their communal identity.
Yeah. All right. Last question. It's the toughest one. Oftentimes, when people get to this stage of life, divorce becomes a very real thing. Any thoughts about that?
Unfortunately, I have assisted, I hate to use that word, but or moderated or been part of several what we call gray divorces, people that are divorcing around the time of retirement. My advice is there's only so much in assets and income to now be split across two households. If you can hire a good mediator and avoid severe litigation, it's going to save you both a lot of money. So be objective about it. Hire a mediator. Avoid the nasty legal battle. I've seen cases go down the legal battle, and all it does is use up a lot of assets that are now not available for what either spouse actually wanted.
Mm. All right, Dana, we covered a lot of ground. Anything we missed or anything that bears reemphasizing?
I think, as always, having the financial side laid out. So, if one spouse were to keep working and have access to benefits like healthcare that we talked about, once you can quantify that piece, I think it really does free you up to have some of these other, I'll call them more values-based discussions around each person's role and how they're feeling about retirement. So I'm a fan of exploring both halves at once.
Yeah. So in the next time we chat and talk more about common retirement questions, we'll be tackling one of my favorites, which is when should I begin taking Social Security? Can't wait to talk about that.
Look forward to it.